Welcome to a webinar on Inaport version 8. We're excited to have the opportunity to present the new features and functionality to you and like to thank you in advance for giving us your time. Very briefly before we dive into features, just talking about releases and release cycles and so on. Inaport is basically in continuous development. We do an average of a new build every couple of weeks and update the website every month or so, but most of those are under the hood type changes. So you can see on this screen that we talk about the various different things that go on in the product. Under the hood is bug fixes, enhancements, performance enhancements, minor feature tweaks, and they are happening all the time, and they're generally happening in response to either requests from customers or us identifying a problem. So we will get bug fixes out as quickly as possible, and we'll also send patches out to particular customers to address particular issues. The second general area is function enhancements and improvements. So we're doing a fair bit of professional services work, and again we're working closely with our channel partners and with our end users. So where we see a pain spot, we try to address that fairly quickly with minor enhancements to the product. And then of course there's big new features. So we'll do 2 or 3 major releases a year. We're trying to get into a quarterly cycle of major releases, but you'll see minor releases coming out through the course of the year. And we're experimenting with ways of keeping our customers in the loop on what's happening with the product. One of the very important things is it's very rare for us to make a breaking change, and if we do make a breaking change, we will highlight that. So you should always be able to upgrade the product to the current release without any breaking changes to profiles or other integrations that you've already built. It should always be an enhancement, unless of course we're forced by some feature in one of the target CRM systems to make a breaking change. Moving more into some of the detail, under the hood improvements, there's been, at last count, I think about 50 small bug fixes over the course of the last 12 months in Inaport, and they range across the various CRM systems, minor things like getting the state of fields correct, fixing issues with parameterization of SQL, and various other bits and pieces. I won't go into all the gory details. We're continually working on performance, so we've got performance analysis tools, and many of you have watched the in-memory indexing building, so we're always working on tweaking that and looking at ways to improve that performance. And error handling is perhaps the biggest area. What we're continually trying to do is to capture errors and report them in a meaningful way to you, either in the logging or in the user interface. And if you see something that's not quite right, please feel free to ping us. Make sure that you let us know, because we are, as I said, in continual improvement on the product itself. We're working very hard to make sure it's a smoothly functioning engine for what it is that you need to do. Improved features. I'm going to be actually not boring you to death with PowerPoint. We're going to flip across to a demonstration in a minute, and we're going to talk about 2 areas. One is improvements to existing functionality, and the other is new functionality that's coming in. The new functionality will be split into 2 areas. One is general functionality that applies across all implementations of Inaport, and the other is areas where we've improved it for specific CRM systems. So in improved functionality, as opposed to fully new stuff, we've done a lot of work on improving the log file capabilities. You've had the ability to write log files virtually since day one, but we've done quite a bit of work to give you enhanced functionality and enhanced configuration capability in that area, and I'll spend some time demonstrating that and give you an illustration as to why it's important. In the new functionality, we'll be talking about some of the enhancements we've made to how you can query data sources. In particular, you can now do local caching, in-memory caching of data sources, and that gives us the ability to do things like round robin on the local memory. And I'll go into some detail as to why that's important and useful. So coming back to improvements in functionality and focusing on logging in particular. Logging has become quite important because we've got customers that are using Inaport to run 50 or more jobs per night. So they're doing extensive integrations, and it becomes a challenge to manage the accumulation of logging information. So we've developed some techniques that I'm going to show you in a moment and enhance the logging capabilities. So let me flip across to Inaport and start talking about some of these capabilities. So what you can see on the screen is the standard Inaport profile. This is a demonstration profile that pulls data from an Excel file and writes it to a local Microsoft MSCRM instance, MSCRM 2013. And I'll be highlighting various bits of functionality as we go through it. On the first tab, you can see that we've got the ability to execute expressions before the connectors are opened, before the job starts or after the job completes. That functionality has been there for a while, but what I've used it to illustrate is some of the enhancements to our logging. And I should backtrack at this point and talk about what we're using for logging. We're using a product called Log4net. That's LOG, the number 4, net. It's an open source product. It's extensively used for logging in the industry. And one of the big advantages it gives us is the ability to configure multiple targets to Inaport. And the way that works is in the Inaport installation directory, you now have a file called loggingconfig.xml. That file is an XML file that allows you to configure multiple logging targets. And this is what the file looks like. It's fully documented, and you can see examples of how to implement this at the URL that's in this up here in the help. But the basic idea is you have two areas. One is you set up logging targets, in other words, where you want to write log information to, and then you specify a logger which may write to multiple targets at the same time. We've got a set of targets set up for you by default, so this writes to the console, but more interestingly, we've got a default target that sets up to write to a debug log file. Or you can set up to write to a rolling log file, and a rolling log file lets you specify the maximum size of file that you want to accumulate, 10 megabytes, 100 megabytes, and then it will archive off the log file, change its name to a date timestamp, and then start a new log file, and you can specify how many log files that you're going to accumulate. So what this means is that you can set up a rolling log file on jobs and keep only the last 5, 10, 15, 20 log files and then have them archived off, so that if there's a problem, you've got the information in the logs, but you're not filling up gigabytes of disk space with your logging information. But Log4net gives us some fairly interesting capabilities. So for example, we can also log directly to a database. So this is a bit complex. It's actually a bit more complex than it needs to be. But this is saying that we want to set up logging to a SQL database. And if I go across and have a look, you can see here that I've set up a logging database with a log table, and I've written log messages to that log database. So you can now write your log information both to files and to SQL, or some combination thereof. Going back to the log file, this is how you set up your logger, but then down here you can actually specify loggers that are named and use the target. So in Log4net, an appender ref is the target of where you want to go. And down here you can set up your own loggers. So I've set up a logger called SQL log that is writing to the SQL appender, which is the guy that we set up here, that writes out to the database. And then in Inaport, we've given you the ability to specify where you want log information to go. So notice here, I've said that I want to write log to my standard user log file. So that information is going to appear in the normal Inaport log that you get for every profile when you set up logging. So we now give you the ability to write your own information to that user log file. So you can do things like test conditions on input records and write information to the log file to say record number 14 had a particular type of problem with it. But we've also given you the ability to, if you set up your own logger in the log configuration file, you can write out to that logger as well. So we've given you the ability to set up multiple loggers and write different information to those different loggers. We've also got a function called do all that basically just says execute every one of the expressions that we have inside the brackets. So what this set of expressions is going to do is to write information to the standard user log file, job starting at and the current date time. And it's also going to write a log to the database to say the job starting at and the job start and date and time. Now these before and after expressions give you the ability to execute any kind of expression that you want before the job starts or after the job completes and before the connectors are open or after they're closed. So we've got customers that are using this to execute SQL stored procedures after the connectors are opened or after the job completes but before the connectors are closed, to go and clean up temporary tables that they've used during an import operation or send information off to another database. We've also got customers using it to execute external FTP applications to pull information down from a mainframe and store the CSV files locally for the Inaport to then process. Moving through the profile, update preview, standard sort of preview stuff here. We're importing information about the Game of Thrones. I don't know if anybody is a Game of Thrones fan, but we're now importing that into CRM. And you can see down here that we're using the logging information again to write information out to the SQL database to say that record ID and then picking up the ID field from the record has been processed. And if you go into the SQL database, you can see, obviously I've run this multiple times, but you can see the log messages have been recorded from there. Whoops, come back. Pardon me. So, pardon me. Get rid of my GoToMeeting tab over there. And expand my audience view so I can see what you're seeing. So coming back to the PowerPoint, the other way that you can use this information, or the logging capabilities, is to create what we call unified log files. And I'll give you an example of what we've done over here. That's here. So this is something that we set up for a customer. So they've got multiple different types of jobs running. So we're putting the individual runs of each profile into a log directory for the Sage 50, but they're running 10, 15, 20 jobs a day for these particular profiles. And if there's an error, going through and looking at each log file is kind of tedious. So at the same time, we are writing to a unified log file that aggregates the information across the entire day. So you can see that we've got January 14, January 15, go away. And then we've got the unified log file that aggregates the information across the run. So you can see here that we've got information about each job that started and if there'd been a problem, like there was here, we get the information into the unified log file. So the objective is to ensure that we get all the detailed information we have from the individual logging, but we can also aggregate unified logging into a single log file for much easier management reporting and exception handling. That's probably enough information on logging. Very happy to spend more time on it or go through it in more detail. The objective of today is to only take about 45 minutes to go through everything, and then I'll open it up to questions, and anybody that wants to hang around and do a deep dive, more than happy for you to. Second area we wanted to cover, or another area we wanted to cover, is querying and local caching. So if I come back here, you've had the ability to do DB select or select queries on your source or your target for a very long time, and I'm sure all of you have used that functionality at some stage or other. A while ago we introduced the ability to have the query actually query any connector that you like. Now what this means for you is that you can go out to a third database or a fourth database and query that connector on the fly during your import operation. So if I go to my connector manager and have a look at this demo map function, go to Tools, Connector Manager, Demo Map, you can see that it's an Excel connector opening up an Excel file. And if we go and have a look at that Excel file, which I should have done before I started this, read only. You can see that it's just got some lookup information. So what we have in Inaport is we've got a status field coming in, but that status field is not in the format that we need it for mapping into the target system. So we're doing a lookup on that Excel spreadsheet to translate from the status that we've got in the incoming field to the status that we need in CRM. So we're doing a query on the Excel, select CRM status from status map, where status equals status. Pretty straightforward stuff, but it gives you a lot of flexibility because you can now use an Excel spreadsheet for all the various different maps that you need to set up. So instead of doing row after row after row of conditional test in tab 4 to say if the status equals uncertain, then set the status to be CRM underscore uncertain, etc. You can use a single Excel spreadsheet. And this also means that when you configure it for your end users, you can set up the Excel spreadsheet and tell them, look, if you need to make changes to these status tests, just change the Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to go in and modify the profile. The second thing that we've done though, and this is new, so you've had that kind of capability for a while, although a lot of people don't realize that it's there. But we're working, one of the areas that we've now done is giving you the ability to build local caches. And the reason we've done that is more and more we're all working with CRM systems or data sources that are out on the web. And as I'm sure you're painfully aware, any query to any web data source, be it CRM or something else, takes a long time, relatively speaking, versus querying an in-memory a local Excel spreadsheet or SQL database. So Inaport now gives you the ability to build an in-memory cache of the records. So the expression that I've highlighted here is doing a query against my target, so it's just specified T as the target, and it's saying select contact ID, first name, last name from contact. Now, this is not something you would normally do because you probably don't need to bring the whole contact table into memory, but it's illustrative of what you can do. What Inaport will do when it hits this query is the second parameter is specifying the name of the cache. So I've specified const as the name of the cache. So Inaport will check, do we have this cache in memory? If we do not have that cache in memory, Inaport will execute the query and populate the cache. The next time this query is executed, Inaport will say the cache is already there, I don't need to execute. So this select query will only be executed once during a run. And that in-memory cache is then available to us for further processing. So we can do lookups against that in-memory cache. Now what this means is that at runtime, you're doing a single query against your web data source and then doing lookups in memory against that cached data, which can lead in some circumstances to dramatic improvements in performance. A more useful example is this one here. We're hitting the users table in CRM and we're then pulling down the users table into an in-memory cache so that we can then do lookups against that in-memory cache and do allocation of ownership based on on how we're looking up that cache. So the combination of these features can, in some circumstances, give you a very dramatic improvement in performance. If I go across to the next tab, you can see how we're looking up the cache. So this guy here is an array lookup onto the user's cache that we set up, and pardon me. If we go into database functions and drill down, you can see we've got a range of new functions available to us that let us do, for example, look in the specified column of the array, so the third column. So I'm going into the third column of the cache, and then I'm looking up the last name, and I'm returning the first column. So what that's going to do is to use the last name into the users table and return the user ID out of that user based on the last name. And if I cancel out of that, come back here and click Update Preview so that I can run the expression. Pardon me. And then come here and click that and click Test Expression. You can see that we've done a lookup onto the cache and got the GUID for that user based on the person's last name in this expression here, whatever their last name was. There we go, Stark. So this process can give you quite a dramatic performance improvement in many scenarios. The other area the other enhancement that we've given you is the ability to do round robin on that in-memory cache. Now we implemented that for a customer where they're importing hundreds of leads a day, and they're importing those leads into multiple different sales teams. So they're pulling from Eloqua, which is a large marketing automation system, and they're, as I say, they're bringing in hundreds of leads, and they've got multiple internal teams. So we're doing a test, actually doing multiple tests based on the territory, based on the product type, etc., and saying, well, this particular lead has to go to the internal sales team, or this particular lead needs to go to the Western team, etc. But then within the team, we need to make sure that the leads are allocated fairly. So what we implemented is a round robin capability, a round robin function that simply pulls the next line out of the in-memory cache. So because we've got the ability to cache stuff in memory, we can now do things like this. We can do selective lookups, but using the round robin means that we can load the sales team into memory from an Excel spreadsheet, pardon me, and then allocate the leads fairly across that sales team. And the other tweak that we did with the round robin is when the job starts, it doesn't start at row 1 in the spreadsheet. It starts at a random row. So it might start at row 15, start allocating 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and then wrap around and go to row 1, row 2, row 3. And the reason for that is if you always start at row 1, then whoever the person is in the first row is going to get a disproportionate share of the leads. So that's an example of how you can use the caching capability. There's been a couple of other tweaks in the database area as well. The other one that you can do is execute SQL stored procedures. So you can execute a SQL stored procedure against any connector, so source or target or some other third connector. And you can have parameterized SQL stored procedures. So you can pass in parameters to the stored procedure as well on the fly on an import operation. I want to come back and illustrate one other area that's fairly new. I showed you in this one doing a lookup onto an Excel spreadsheet to remap the status field from the source to the target. And this kind of lookup operation happens a lot, and particularly it happens a lot in migration projects. We do a lot of work migrating Goldmine, ACT, Salesforce, various other systems into the target CRM systems. And one of the big processes that you have with any of those is remapping the pick lists, option sets, lookup fields, whatever you want to call them. So you've got this kind of DB select capability, but another piece of functionality we've added is the ability to edit, create file maps. So Inaport now gives you the ability to create a text map that says what my source is, what my target is. But you can do a couple of things. One is you can load this map from a CSV file. Now what that means is you can go into your source database, do a select distinct or a select group by on the field that you're having to remap to the target, and get all of the distinct values from that field. Now, if any of you have done any migration work, you know that a lot of the time the data is pretty dirty. So instead of saying uncertain, it might say uncertain or really uncertain or almost uncertain or misspell the names, and you get all those different values in there that you have to remap. So by doing a select distinct and then loading it into this map, you have the ability to then set up what it should be. And we also give you the ability to do searches on regular expressions. So here I'm saying anything that has uncer, UNCER, uppercase or lowercase gets mapped to the value CRM uncertain. I can have multiple maps as well. So I can have a map for my status field. I can have a map for my account status field. I can have a map for my states. I can have a map for my countries. I can have a map for other territories. I can have as many different maps as I like, and I can load each of those maps from a CSV file if I want. And then to use them, we give you the this fmap function, specifies what map file we want, what map we're going to use, and then what value we're going to look up. So I'm going to look up the status field, test expression, it comes back and says that because the source status field here is uncertain, the target, what we're going to map it to is CRM uncertain. So an extension of the capabilities to remap. So we're giving you multiple ways of slicing the same problem. Any questions at this point? I'll pause for just a moment. Okay, that's quite a lot of information to accumulate, but I want to go on and show you one other area that, again, has been there for a while, but a lot of people aren't terribly familiar with it. And this is the ability to execute functions on a particular table before the target row is updated or after the target row is updated. So here I'm saying on the contact table, if we inserted a row, I'm going to go and update my source, and again this could be any connector, but I'm updating my source, and I'm saying update the contact spreadsheet, set the CRM state, which is this field here, to be inserted where the ID is whatever the ID value is, so this is the ID from the incoming record. If it was updated, then I'm saying actually go and grab the primary key from the record we just updated and insert that, or update the CRM state field. So you can see in the Excel spreadsheet in the source data in our preview pane down here, we've worked with, we've run this a couple of times, and row 1 has been updated, so we've stored the primary key from the row that we updated. Row 2 has been inserted, but we haven't got around to updating it yet, so it's showing as inserted. So you've got the ability to update your source or update some other record in your system somewhere with information about the target system. And we're using this a lot for building cross-reference tables. Again, the process of working with web-based CRM systems is a major performance impact. Every single query, every with interaction you do with that CRM system is orders of magnitude slower than working with an on-premise database. So using this kind of DB update, DB insert query after the record has been touched in the target CRM system, what we're able to do in many scenarios is to either update the source table or build a cross-reference table in the source database that cross-correlates the source identifier and the target identifier, and we can then use that in subsequent profiles. So instead of having to do a query against the target system, or instead of having to build an index on the target system, we can use that cross-reference table to go and update the to match on and use that for the target. And that can have a really dramatic impact on in many scenarios. We've got a fairly extensive blog post on our blog talking about using in-memory caching and talking about building cross-reference tables to dramatically improve performance. So what we've talked about is a fair bit about logging and a fair bit about the way we've enhanced your query capability. There's other minor stuff as well, but the general objective of these enhancements is to improve your ability to manage large integration projects and to improve performance, particularly when you're dealing with web-based systems. All of the stuff that I've talked about so far has been general across the entire system. So any integration, any target CRM system is going to benefit from those. We have, however, made specific improvements for particular target CRM systems. So not all of this is going to be relevant to all of you, but if it is relevant, it's highly relevant. Starting with Microsoft CRM, we've added the ability to do what's called execute multiple, which is building batches of records that, so let me retract. When you update a target entity in CRM, an account or a contact, the way it works under the hood is you build a web service call that says insert this row of information into the account or the contact. So we send that web service call off, and then Inaport sits there and twiddles its thumbs while that web service call is processed and the result comes back. And then we move on to the next row and build the next row, send off the web service call, and Inaport twiddles its thumbs and waits for the result to come back. That we've done performance analysis. Inaport spends essentially 98%, 99% of its time waiting for the web service calls to come back. With the execute multiple capability, what we can instead do is build a single web service call with multiple rows in it, 50 rows, 100 rows, 500 rows, 1,000 rows, you get to decide. And we then send that web service call off as a single batch operation. That goes up to CRM, and CRM then has the ability to process 50 rows or 100 rows, so it doesn't have to do the load on your CRM server is lighter as well, because it then has a batch of rows that it can process in a single operation. The next enhancement we did on that was to add multi-threading capability. So you can specify that you want to actually have 2 threads or 4 threads or 6 threads that are all building batches at the same time and firing those batches off to CRM. So Inaport, you can be reading records from the source and building a batch whilst the CRM is in the process of executing the last batch. And you can send multiple batches up to the CRM server using different logins. So CRM can actually be working on multiple batches at the same time. So this can get somewhere between a 5 and 10 times performance improvement, and some scenarios we've seen it up to 20 or 30 times performance improvement. It does depend a fair bit on what it is that you're actually doing, and there are some restrictions on it, which I'll go into if any of you are interested in the Q&A session later. But again, we're very focused on trying to make sure that performance with cloud-based systems is as good as possible, and that's one of the ways that we're doing it. Moving on to Infor CRM, also known as SalesLogix. The major change there's been a lot of minor enhancements and tweaks, but the major change there is we've implemented an S-Data connector. So if you're working with CRM, with SalesLogix Cloud, then you can use S-Data for talking to that system without having to try and set up Inaport inside the virtual machine in the cloud environment. And we'll be working on enhancing that S-Data connector to add the same kind of batch capabilities as we have with the MS-CRM connector. Other minor tweaks over the last year or so: added Unicode support for SalesLogix. That was a while ago actually, and other minor bug fixes and performance enhancements. Sage CRM has not been forgotten. There's been a raft of changes, particularly with CRM 7.2 when we went from 7.1 to 7.2, and there was a big change to the underlying database schema. So the email link table and phone link tables were modified, so we've enhanced that. They moved to using a unique identifier, a standard SQL unique identifier on the record, rather than using the stored procedure for updating the ID. So we modified the connector to be able to handle that, and all of that's pretty much seamless under the hood for people working with Sage CRM. Then, coming up, what's coming next? One of the ones that we're working on quite hard at the moment is putting licenses into the connector. Now, what does that actually mean? At the moment, as I'm sure you're all aware, the way Inaport licensing works is you go to the Tools, License Manager, and you specify the license that you want to work with. And that license then dictates what CRM system you can connect to and what capabilities you have, whether it's standard or professional, etc. We've now got a lot of customers that have multiple CRM instances. Typically they'll have a production instance and then one or more test and staging and development CRM instances. At the moment, what that means is that when you want to move from your production CRM system to a test CRM system, you have to change the license that you're using because the license is keyed against a particular CRM system. What we are working on doing is giving you the ability to specify in your connector, not sure where there we go. Specify in the connector the license that you want to use for that particular connector. You'll then have multiple licenses on your system. You'll have your main production license, which you'd still install into the Tools License Manager. But then if you've got a test CRM system, you'll have a license to use against that test CRM system, and you can specify in the connector that you want to use that test license. And Inaport will say, okay, that's fine, we'll use that test license against this test CRM system. So you'll then be able to have a connector for your production system and a connector for your test system, and you'll then, Inaport will then use whichever license is appropriate. So it'll make life, it's one of the areas where we're working on trying to make life as easy as possible for everybody. So that's change number one on the licensing side. Change number two on the licensing side is we're going to, over the next quarter, be introducing the option, you won't be forced to, but you'll have the option of subscription licensing, which means a monthly or maybe a quarterly subscription for your licensing system. So that's obviously a pretty big change in our infrastructure. So you may or may not have noticed that we redid our website a few weeks ago. It was actually a multi-month project because there was a lot of changes under the hood, brought it into the 21st century, using some of the new features and functionality that the cool kids are using. But part of that is we're working on the infrastructure to put in place subscription licensing. So you'll be able to have licenses where you just rent them monthly or quarterly against your target system. Then the third major area that we're working on, again, hoping to have it launched by October or early November, is Salesforce Connector. So we're getting a lot of requests to do migrations from Salesforce, but we're also getting requests to import into or integrate with Salesforce. So we're adding Salesforce capability to Inaport. And I guess perhaps the most important thing from my perspective is, what do you guys want? Very happy either now or by email or phone call later on to get feedback from you, our customers, our power users, to say, well, that's all very nice, but I really need function X. I really need some extra capability here. I need some enhancements there. So we're very, very interested in getting information back from you guys as to what you want to see or areas that could be improved. So with that,
let's do a brief recap before we fly off into the future on our jet-propelled rocket ships. We covered the release process. We talked about how Inaplex has moved towards a continuous build process where we do lots of small builds, and we're heading towards 3 to 4 major releases per year. We covered a range of enhancements. There are general enhancements such as the logging capabilities, the enhanced querying capabilities, the in-memory caching that apply to all versions of Inaport. And we covered specific enhancements for Microsoft CRM, Info CRM, Sage CRM, other systems. We briefly also touched on our upcoming changes, license changes such as adding a license to the connector to make using test development environments easier, and moving towards a subscription model for licensing. And we indicated that we're going to be releasing a connector for Salesforce. Thank you very much for your time. We're always looking for feedback. Please feel free to contact us on our forums on the website. use the Contact Us button on the website, ping us on Twitter, write to us on our blog, or even pick up the phone and call to us or send us an email. Thank you, and have a good day.